You ever notice how when an older man dates a younger woman, everyone has something to say, but no one really understands what's actually going on underneath the surface? People will judge, assume, even mock, but deep down they don't realize there's something psychological, something primal, something ancient about these kinds of connections. You see, age gap relationships have always carried this strange mix of curiosity and controversy, but if you've ever found yourself drawn to a younger woman, or even just wondered why it happens so often, you're not crazy. You're not weird. In fact, you might just be following a part of male nature that modern society tries to suppress. Because here's the truth: age gap attraction isn't just about looks, youth, or some midlife crisis stereotype people love to throw around. It's about energy, it's about polarity, it's about something that has existed since the beginning of human connection, the dynamic between wisdom and vitality, stability and admiration, masculine leadership and feminine curiosity. Most people don't want to hear that because it breaks the nice little box society wants to put you in. But once you understand this psychology, everything about attraction starts to make sense. So let me ask you this. Have you ever met a younger woman who looked at you differently than women your own age do? Maybe she listened more intently, asked you questions about life, admired the way you carried yourself. Not because you were trying to impress her, but because you had something she subconsciously respected: presence, that calm confidence that doesn't come from showing off, but from experience. To her, that feels rare, safe, even exciting. And yet, she can't always explain why. Most women, especially younger ones, are emotionally drawn to men who seem grounded in who they are. Men who've faced chaos, made mistakes, and come out sharper. It's not about your wallet or your status, it's the psychological pull of maturity. You give off this signal: I know who I am, and I don't need your approval. That's magnetic because while her world might still feel uncertain, you represent something she craves: direction, strength wrapped in patience, masculinity that doesn't need to scream to be seen. But here's where it gets deeper. And this is the part most men never understand. When a woman is younger, she's still forming her identity, figuring out her values, her emotional boundaries, her sense of purpose. When she meets a man who's already walked that path, who has clarity, she feels drawn to him because he unconsciously represents her future self's stability. It's not manipulation, it's human psychology. It's the dance between development and direction. She learns through his certainty, while he rediscovers energy, spontaneity, and the thrill of being admired again. And yet, the world rarely celebrates that. Instead, it shames it. Society calls it creepy or unfair, as if two people can't form a genuine bond because of a few years' difference. But if you look past the noise, you'll see something real happening, something both people quietly benefit from. The man finds renewal in her curiosity, and she finds grounding in his strength. It's a balance, a trade of energy, the kind that goes beyond physical attraction. But here's the part that stings. Most men destroy these connections without realizing it. They either overcompensate, trying to act younger, trying to fit in, or they get too controlling, trying to teach instead of lead. And that's when the polarity collapses. The very energy that attracted her in the first place, your calm maturity, disappears. And when that happens, everything changes. When that balance breaks, something subtle but powerful starts to shift. You'll notice it in her eyes first. That spark, that fascination she once had when she looked at you, begins to fade. It's not always sudden. Sometimes it's slow, almost invisible, but she starts to see you differently. You stop being that strong, grounded man she admired, and instead, you become another guy trying too hard to hold on to something that was never meant to be controlled. And here's the truth most men don't want to face. Once you start chasing her youth, instead of embracing your own depth, she loses respect for you. See, the thing about younger women is they don't fall for men who try to act their age. They fall for the man who owns his. They're not attracted to a man who hides his experience. They're drawn to one who wears it with quiet pride. The lines on your face, the calmness in your tone, the patience in your reactions, oh, those aren't flaws. Those are signals, signals of strength, stability, and self-control, traits her generation rarely sees anymore. When you start trying to be the fun, flashy, over-energetic guy just to keep up with her world, you destroy the polarity that made her admire you in the first place. It's like this. She doesn't want to be your excitement. She wants to feel your certainty. And that certainty comes from a man who knows that time is his ally, not his enemy. A man who knows his value doesn't shrink with age. It compounds. Just like wisdom, just like confidence. And when you embody that truth, she can feel it. That's when she leans in more, listens more, trusts you more, because you're not trying to convince her of your worth, you're living it. But let's talk about the emotional dynamic here, because this is where the psychology gets interesting. In many age gap relationships, what's really happening is a subconscious exchange of unmet needs. For her, it's emotional safety, that deep desire to feel seen, understood, and guided. For you, it's emotional rejuvenation, that spark you may have lost somewhere along the way, buried under responsibility and routine. She brings life into your world. You bring structure into hers. It's not transactional, it's transformational when handled with the right mindset. But if you approach it from ego, it crumbles. Because ego says, I deserve her because I've earned it. Maturity says, I appreciate her because she reminds me how alive I still am. Ego wants control. Maturity values connection. Ego fears being replaced. Maturity understands that attraction thrives in freedom. And that difference, that inner balance, is what determines whether an age gap relationship becomes powerful or painfully short-lived. The hidden truth, the one no one tells you, is that most of these relationships don't fail because of the years between you. They fail because the man forgets why she was drawn to him in the first place. He stops embodying that emotional leadership and starts seeking validation instead. The moment you start needing her admiration, you lose it. The very thing that pulled her toward you, your calm detachment, your sense of direction, turns into insecurity, and women can sense that faster than you can hide it. So what's the real secret? You don't lead her with your age, you lead her with your energy, not by trying to be young again, but by showing her what true maturity feels like, composed, grounded, unshaken. That's what builds attraction that lasts beyond the initial thrill. But there's another layer most men overlook, something that reveals whether an age gap relationship is built on real connection or emotional fantasy. It's subtle, but once you see it, you'll never unsee it. That hidden layer, the one that separates fantasy from something real, lies in emotional depth. You see, when a younger woman is drawn to an older man, it often begins with fascination. She's intrigued by your calmness, the way you don't react to every little thing, the way you move through life with quiet certainty. It's almost mysterious to her, like she's meeting a version of masculinity she's only read about or seen in movies. But fascination isn't the same as connection, and this is where most men either rise or fall. If you let her fascination stay on the surface, the dinners, the compliments, the excitement, it fades. But if you guide her into emotional depth, into conversation that awakens her mind and challenges her beliefs, she feels something different, a bond. Women may chase excitement, but they stay for emotional security. That doesn't mean you have to become her therapist or her savior. In fact, don't. It means showing her that your world is built on values, not moods, that you can be her peace without losing your edge. That's what separates you from every young guy who's just trying to impress her. Now, here's the psychological twist. Younger women in age gap relationships often project parts of their emotional growth onto the man. She may see in you the strength she hopes to develop one day, the discipline she's trying to find within herself, the grounded energy she secretly admires but hasn't mastered yet. And if you handle that dynamic with awareness, it can become something powerful because your presence doesn't just attract her, it elevates her. You become the emotional mirror that helps her see who she could become. But if you handle it wrong, it turns into dependency. She begins to rely on you for validation instead of growth. And eventually, that emotional weight crushes the connection. That's why it's crucial that you never position yourself as her teacher or her rescuer. You're not there to fix her or shape her into who you think she should be. That's where a lot of men slip up. They confuse leadership with control. Real leadership in a relationship means guiding with presence, not pressure. You set the tone through your example, not through lectures. She'll follow your energy far more than your words. And that's where the balance lies, the dance between emotional maturity and romantic freedom. When she feels your strength, she relaxes into her feminine energy. She starts to trust more, open more, express more. But if you become rigid, overly protective, or controlling, she'll start to rebel. Because deep down, no woman wants to feel like she's being raised. She wants to feel like she's being inspired. So the question becomes, how do you create that dynamic where the attraction stays alive, the respect deepens, and the age difference becomes irrelevant? It's not by hiding your maturity or flaunting your experience. It's by embodying emotional clarity, that quiet confidence that says, I don't need you to fill a void, I just enjoy sharing space with you. When a woman feels that energy, she doesn't see years. She sees a man she can trust with her heart. But here's the part no one tells you. The moment you get emotionally attached without awareness, the entire energy flips. The power dynamic changes. What was once admiration can turn into resistance. And if you don't recognize that shift when it happens, you'll lose her faster than you think. When that shift happens, right when admiration quietly turns into resistance, it's rarely about something you said or did on the surface. It's about energy. In the beginning, she admired your strength, your calmness, your ability to stand still in a world full of noise. But slowly, if you start seeking her reassurance, chasing her attention, or fearing her withdrawal, that strength begins to fade in her eyes. You become emotionally reactive instead of centered, and the woman who once looked at you as her anchor begins to feel something she can't always put into words, disappointment. You see, women may not always analyze it consciously, but they feel energy shifts. When you start moving from grounded confidence to emotional dependence, they sense it immediately. It's like the polarity reverses. The very dynamic that once made her feel safe now makes her feel pressured. Because instead of leading with calm assurance, you're leading with fear of loss. And fear, my friend, is the fastest way to kill attraction. But here's where it gets complicated. Younger women in age gap relationships often test this without even realizing it. They'll pull back, question the connection, or suddenly seem distant. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they're subconsciously checking your emotional foundation. They want to see if you'll crumble or remain composed, and that moment, that exact test, determines everything. If you panic, if you chase, if you start over explaining or trying to prove your worth, you fail the test. Because what she's really looking for is your emotional consistency. The kind that says, I value you, but I don't depend on you to feel whole. When you embody that, she feels safe again. But if your confidence was built on her validation instead of your purpose, she'll feel it. And she'll pull away for good. Think about it like this. When she challenges you emotionally, she's not attacking you. She's checking if your masculinity is real or performative, if it's rooted in depth or ego. That's what women do, consciously or subconsciously, as they test for truth. And in age gap relationships, those tests come sooner and hit harder because she's trying to understand if what she's drawn to is truly stable or just temporary confidence. The irony is, most men interpret these moments as rejection. They start questioning everything. Was she using me? Did she lose interest? Was it all fake? But if you zoom out, what's really happening is that she's trying to reconcile two feelings: her admiration for you and her fear of being emotionally overpowered. She wants to trust you, but she also wants to maintain her sense of independence. And if you can navigate that without reacting, with understanding instead of ego, you become 10 times more attractive. Because real attraction isn't built on constant validation. It's built on trust. And trust can only exist when both people feel emotionally free. That's why your job isn't to convince her of your worth. It's to remain the same man she was drawn to from the start, calm, steady, confident in silence. That energy makes her feel something that few men ever do: emotional safety. And when a woman feels safe enough to be vulnerable with you, to share her doubts, fears, or insecurities without judgment, that's when the connection deepens beyond age, beyond attraction. It becomes something rare. But there's still one truth that most men overlook about these relationships, something hidden beneath all the psychology and emotion, a truth that determines whether it will last or quietly fade away. That hidden truth, the one that decides whether your age gap relationship becomes a lifelong bond or a fleeting memory, is emotional alignment. Because no matter how strong the chemistry is, no matter how intense the attraction feels, if your emotional worlds don't align, the connection will eventually drift apart. You can't build something lasting on fascination alone. You build it on shared direction, shared peace, and shared emotional rhythm. Here's what most men miss. A younger woman might be drawn to your wisdom, your stability, and your strength, but she also wants to feel emotionally understood. Not fathered, not managed, understood. That's the difference between a connection that grows and one that fades. You see, when a woman feels that you respect her emotional experience, even if she's less mature, even if she's still figuring herself out, she lets down her guard. Because for her, respect is love. And when she feels that, she doesn't see age anymore and she sees presence. But if you ever start using your experience as a weapon, comparing, lecturing, or making her feel small, she'll disconnect. Because while she may admire your strength, she won't surrender her spirit to a man who makes her feel inferior. You want her to feel inspired, not controlled, uplifted, not managed. That's the fine line that keeps attraction alive, and it's the reason why some older men keep women's hearts for years. Not because they're better, but because they know how to lead without dominating. The truth is, age gap relationships aren't really about years, they're about balance. When your maturity complements her energy, when your patience meets her curiosity, something rare happens. You both start healing parts of yourselves you didn't even realize were broken. You help her slow down. She helps you feel alive again. You show her stability. She reminds you of spontaneity. That's not manipulation. That's chemistry in its purest form. Two different energies completing each other without trying to change each other. But here's where the deepest test comes. Over time, you'll have to decide, do you want her admiration or do you want her respect? Because admiration can fade with novelty, but respect grows with authenticity. If you stay grounded in who you are, not trying to relive your youth or play the role of her mentor, she'll see you as a man who leads himself first. And that kind of man, no matter his age, will always have a woman's heart. So the hidden truth men were never meant to hear is this: age gap relationships don't fail because of society, judgment, or time. They fail when the man forgets what made her fall in the first place: your wisdom, your direction, your peace. When you lose that, you become replaceable. But when you protect that energy, when you keep showing up as the calm, emotionally centered man who doesn't chase or control, but understands and leads, she'll stay drawn to you in ways she can't even explain. Because at the end of the day, real attraction isn't about youth or age, it's about energy. And the kind of man who has mastered his becomes timeless.